The luxury bank lobby was freezing cold. Brilliant white LED lights glared off polished marble floors. VIP clients sat quietly in a velvet-roped waiting area. But at the main counter stood a single dad in a faded shirt. He slid a massive corporate check across the glass. The branch manager picked it up. She looked at his worn-out shoes, then smirked. "This check is completely fake." Whispers erupted among the tellers. His little girl squeezed his hand tight. Nobody believed him. Then the manager's desk phone rang. A heavy voice on speakerphone echoed through the quiet lobby. "Address him properly, sir." His name was Daniel Harper, 44 years old with tired eyes, messy hair, and the permanent, quiet exhaustion of a man who carried the world on his shoulders. He was a single father. His life was a delicate, chaotic balancing act of school drop-offs, late-night coding sessions, fixing broken toys, and trying to be both a mother and a father to his 8-year-old daughter, Mia. Today, Mia had the day off from school due to a teacher planning day. Daniel couldn't afford to hire a last-minute sitter, nor did he want to. Wherever Daniel went, Mia went. They were an inseparable team, navigating a world that hadn't always been kind to them since Mia's mother passed away. That morning, Daniel needed to run a crucial errand. He needed to deposit a check. It wasn't a birthday check from a grandmother. It wasn't a small tax refund or a meager paycheck from a retail job. It was the final lump sum contract payout from a massive multinational investment fund. It was legitimate. It was earned through thousands of hours of grueling, highly specialized technical work, typed out in the dead of night while his daughter slept in the next room. But Daniel didn't look like a man who possessed that kind of money. He wasn't wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit. He wasn't wearing a platinum Rolex or designer loafers. He was wearing a simple, faded blue button-down shirt that had seen too many laundry cycles, a pair of dark jeans, and scuffed brown work boots. He walked into the towering, glass-fronted downtown branch of First Sterling Bank. This wasn't a local, friendly neighborhood credit union. This was a wealth management hub, the kind of place with vaulted ceilings painted with murals of global commerce. The air inside literally smelled of expensive cologne, polished mahogany, and freshly printed money. To the left, in the VIP waiting area, a man in a bespoke suit was loudly speaking into a Bluetooth earpiece about a real estate acquisition. A woman holding a Birkin bag glanced at Daniel and physically shifted her posture, pulling her purse closer. Daniel ignored them. He took Mia's hand and walked respectfully to the standard teller line, standing behind the heavy velvet ropes. He waited patiently for 15 minutes, letting the people with priority status cut in front of him. When he finally reached the glass counter, he smiled at the young teller, whose name tag read Jessica. He reached into his worn leather wallet and slid the folded check across the cold, polished marble. Jessica unfolded it. Her eyes casually scanned the amount, expecting a few $100s. Then she froze. The color instantly drained from her cheeks. Her breath hitched audibly in her throat. She looked up at Daniel, then down at the faded knees of his jeans, then back at the impossible, staggering number printed on the heavy, watermarked paper. Her hands actually began to tremble. I need to get my manager for a deposit of this magnitude," Jessica stammered, her voice cracking. She quickly stepped away from the window as if the piece of paper was radioactive. A moment later, the heavy mahogany door of a frosted glass corner office swung open. The branch manager emerged. Her name was Linda Grant, 38 years old, sharply dressed in a designer pencil skirt and a crisp silk blouse, with a perfectly rigid posture that practically screamed absolute authority. Linda was used to dealing with corporate titans, arrogant CEOs, and old generational wealth. She prided herself on being a human lie detector, a gatekeeper for the elite. She walked over to the teller station, her expensive heels clicking sharply, aggressively against the marble floor. The sound echoed in the quiet bank. Linda picked up the check. She didn't look at the routing number first. She didn't look at the authorizing signature. She looked straight through the bulletproof glass at Daniel. Her cold, calculating eyes analyzed him from head to toe in less than 3 seconds. She saw the lack of a luxury watch. She saw the slightly wrinkled collar of his shirt. She saw Mia holding a cheap, battered plastic toy rabbit. She saw dust on his boots. In Linda's mind, the verdict was already decided. sealed and delivered. A man who looked like a tired high school teacher or a day laborer did not just casually walk into her elite branch with a multi-million-dollar corporate payout from one of the most ruthless, exclusive investment funds on Wall Street. It was statistically impossible, and Linda Grant absolutely despised anomalies in her pristine bank. She walked over to the open counter, holding the check delicately between her manicured fingers as if it were a diseased, dirty napkin. She looked down her nose at Daniel, her lips curling into a very faint, highly practiced smirk of total condescension. The heavy, uncomfortable atmosphere in the bank immediately began to shift. The wealthy clients in the waiting area slowly stopped reading their financial magazines, sensing the drama. The armed security guard near the heavy glass doors subtly shifted his weight, resting his hand near his radio, his eyes locking dangerously onto Daniel's hands. The judgment had been cast. Now came the execution. Linda stood on the opposite side of the thick, bulletproof glass, staring down at Daniel as if he were an insect that had wandered into a palace. "Mr. Harper," Linda said, reading his name off the payee line with a tone dripping in profound, unfiltered skepticism. "Where exactly did you get this document?" Daniel kept his voice entirely calm. He didn't puff up his chest. He didn't raise his voice or act defensive. "It was issued by the Horizon Vanguard Investment Fund. It's the final payment for a contracted project. I'd like to deposit it into my primary checking account, please." Linda didn't move toward the computer keyboard. Instead, she dramatically held the check up to the harsh, fluorescent overhead light. She was actively, desperately looking for a flaw. A reason to call the police and have him escorted out in handcuffs. She checked the micro-printing along the border. It was perfectly crisp, not pixelated from a cheap printer. She tilted the heavy paper to check the embedded security watermark. The bank's intricate crest shimmered flawlessly in the light. She checked the authorized dual signature lines at the bottom. They were signed in heavy blue ink, pressing deeply into the paper, indicating a real, physical pen, not a printed, flat forgery. She even pulled a small UV blacklight scanner from beneath the counter and passed it over the paper. The invisible security threads glowed perfectly, exactly as they should. There were no obvious errors. It was a masterpiece of highly secure banking paper. But Linda's massive ego refused to accept reality. To her, a perfect check in the hands of a poor-looking man didn't mean it was real. It just meant it was a highly sophisticated, incredibly dangerous forgery orchestrated by an organized crime ring. "I am going to be completely honest with you," Linda said, her voice carrying loudly and clearly across the quiet lobby, purposefully ensuring the other tellers and the wealthy VIP clients could hear her every word. "I highly suspect this check is fake. It does not fit the financial profile of your account history, and frankly, it doesn't fit you." The whispers among the tellers grew louder. The man in the bespoke suit in the waiting area let out a quiet, mocking chuckle. Mia looked up at her dad, her small hands gripping the fabric of his jacket tightly. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly with rising panic. "Are you in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" Daniel knelt down right there on the marble floor, completely ignoring Linda and the staring eyes of the elite for a moment. He looked his daughter in the eyes, placed a warm, calloused hand on her shoulder, and smiled warmly. "No, sweetie. Daddy's not in trouble at all. The lady is just doing her job, even if she's being a little rude about it. It's going to be okay, I promise." He stood back up, his posture straightening. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, unyielding, professional steel. He looked directly at Linda. "I understand your security protocols, but the check is absolutely real. I request that you verify it through your standard institutional channels." Linda's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. She absolutely hated his calmness. Scammers usually panicked, yelled, demanded their check back, or tried to run away when confronted with the threat of police. Daniel was standing still as a mountain, his heart rate visibly unchanged. He had faced down international cyber syndicates. A condescending bank manager was nothing but a minor inconvenience. "I am going to have to confiscate this document for internal fraud investigation," Linda declared coldly, placing the check on her desk far out of his reach. "You can leave the premises now, and we will contact you in 7 to 14 business days when our legal team makes a final decision on whether to press federal charges." No, Daniel said. His voice dropped an octave. It lost all its conversational warmth, but retained a sharp, polite professionalism. You are not confiscating a legitimate financial instrument without processing it. Look up the routing number. The issuing bank is your own parent institution. You have direct, unrestricted access to their clearing system. Run the serial number right now. Linda glared at him, her face flushing with anger. How dare a man in a faded, cheap shirt dictate high-level banking regulations to her in her own branch? Fine, Linda snapped, her voice venomous. She marched over to the secure terminal. She violently typed the long string of routing and account numbers into the system, her acrylic nails clacking aggressively against the keys. She hit enter with unnecessary force, fully expecting the screen to flash bright red with a fraudulent account, seize assets warning. The screen blinked. Then it turned a solid, brilliant green. The system confirmed it immediately. The Horizon Vanguard master account was perfectly valid. The funds were deeply, incredibly solvent, but Linda was stubborn to a fault. She stared at the green screen, gritting her teeth so hard her jaw ached. The account existed, yes, but she was entirely convinced this man had somehow stolen a blank corporate check, forged the payout, and walked in hoping for a dumb teller to push it through. The system recognizes the master account, Linda said loudly, turning back to him, refusing to yield an inch. But I do not believe for one single second that they authorize this specific, astronomical payout to you. I am initiating a manual, Tier 3 override call to the fund's chief financial office. And until they verbally confirm this directly to me, the security guard will ensure you do not leave this building. She signaled the armed guard, who took 2 steps forward, unbuttoning the retaining strap on his holster just slightly. Daniel didn't even look at the guard. He simply nodded at Linda. Make the call. If you firmly believe that true silent confidence is always infinitely stronger than loud rush judgment, hit that subscribe button to witness the exact moment a single phone call changes absolutely everything in this bank. The bank lobby was dead silent. The faint, rhythmic ticking of the large, ornate wall clock sounded like a judge's gavel hitting solid wood. The security guard had moved closer, his hand resting heavily on his belt, staring at Daniel as if he were a highly dangerous, desperate criminal waiting to strike. Linda Grant sat at the manager's desk, perfectly visible to the entire floor through her glass walls. She picked up her heavy black desk phone. Her fingers dialed the secure internal VIP hotline for the Horizon Vanguard Investment Fund, a restricted number reserved exclusively for senior branch managers to report massive, multi-million-dollar fraud attempts and international wire anomalies. The phone rang twice. The sound seemed to echo in Linda's office. Horizon Vanguard, Executive Financial Controller's Office. This is Richard Sterling. The voice on the other end was deep, gravelly, and commanded instant, terrifying respect. It was the voice of a man who moved billions of dollars before breakfast, a man who could bankrupt a small country with a single signature. Linda sat up straighter, adjusting her silk collar, putting on her most professional, urgent, bootlicking voice. Mr. Sterling, this is Linda Grant, Senior Branch Manager at First Sterling Downtown. I apologize for the interruption, but I am calling to report a highly suspicious, likely fraudulent deposit attempt on your primary corporate master account. Excuse me, Richard's voice sharpened instantly, the casual tone vanishing. A fraudulent attempt? On the primary master account? Explain the situation. Now. Linda looked through the glass at Daniel. Daniel was quietly playing a thumb wrestling game with his daughter, completely and utterly unbothered by the fact that he was essentially being held hostage by bank security. A man has presented a physical large-sum payout check, Linda explained, her voice dripping with confident superiority. The paper looks authentic, a very high-end counterfeit, but the situation is completely absurd. He does not match the profile of your typical corporate payee in the slightest. He looks unkempt, disheveled. I have confiscated the check and detained him in the lobby. I need your verbal authorization to flag the serial number, freeze the transaction, and call the federal authorities. There was a tense, incredibly heavy silence on the other end of the line. The sound of rapid, aggressive keyboard typing echoed through the receiver. What is the exact serial number on that check, Linda? Richard demanded, his voice dropping dangerously low, sounding like the calm before a devastating hurricane. Linda read the long string of numbers printed at the top right corner of the paper, feeling a rush of vindication. She was about to save the bank millions. More typing. Then the typing completely stopped. A terrifying dead silence filled the line. Linda, Richard said. The tone of his voice had changed entirely. The corporate sharpness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, terrifying, absolute fury that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. Put me on speakerphone, right now, maximum volume. Linda blinked, her absolute confidence suddenly cracking like thin ice. Sir, standard bank protocol states that for security reasons. I do not care about your protocol. Put me on speakerphone immediately. Trembling slightly, her perfectly manicured fingers shaking, Linda reached out and slammed her finger onto the speaker button. The dial tone clicked, and Richard's heavy, furious voice echoed out of the speaker, bouncing off the pristine marble walls, loud enough for every single teller, every wealthy VIP client, and the armed security guard to hear crystal clearly. Is the man attempting to deposit this check standing right in front of you? Richard's voice boomed like thunder through the quiet bank. Linda swallowed hard, her throat suddenly feeling incredibly dry, like it was lined with sandpaper. Yes, he is here. Does he have dark hair? Is he wearing a blue shirt? Is he standing there holding the hand of a little girl with a pink jacket? Linda's eyes went incredibly wide. The blood instantly drained from her perfectly powdered face, leaving her looking like a ghost. She looked at Daniel. She looked at the little girl in the faded pink jacket. A cold, horrific sweat broke out on the back of her neck. Yes, Linda whispered, her voice shaking violently. Yes, he is. This check is fully verified, Richard's voice roared. It is completely, absolutely legitimate. Linda panicked, her mind scrambling. She tried to save her crumbling ego in front of her staff and the elite clients. But sir, look at him. He doesn't look like an executive. I was only trying to protect your assets, the financial profile. Shut up, Linda, Richard snapped, cutting her off so brutally, so viciously, that two tellers behind the counter physically jumped backward. Richard took a deep, shuddering breath. When he spoke again, his voice echoed through the speaker, heavy with absolute, unquestionable authority and deep respect for the man standing in the lobby. The man standing in front of you is Daniel Harper. He is not just an executive. He is the lead, independent cybersecurity architect for this entire firm. Over the last 8 months, while you were sitting in a comfortable, air-conditioned office, that man worked 80-hour weeks to completely rebuild our entire global trading infrastructure from scratch. Last week, when a Russian syndicate attempted a synchronized ransomware breach on our offshore accounts, Daniel Harper stayed awake for 72 straight hours and crushed them. He is the sole reason our clients' money is safe. He is the reason this fund made $1 billion this quarter. He is worth 10 times whatever we paid him on that check. The entire bank froze. It was as if time itself had stopped. The wealthy clients in the waiting area stared in absolute, jaw-dropping shock, their magazines falling to their laps. The security guard slowly, awkwardly backed away from Daniel, pretending to look at a wall poster, his face flushing crimson. Linda, Richard continued, his voice now as cold and sharp as a scalpel, you will process that deposit immediately. You will waive all holding periods. You will ensure those funds are fully, unconditionally available in his account before he walks out of those doors. A devastating silence hung heavily in the air. Then Richard spoke one final time. And Linda, when you hand him his receipt, you will drop your arrogant attitude, you will look him dead in the eye, and you will address him properly. Call him sir. Click. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed loudly from the desk speaker for 3 excruciating, agonizing seconds before Linda managed to hit the mute button with a violently trembling finger. The silence that followed in the lobby was suffocating. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Every single eye in the building, from the tellers to the VIPs to the humiliated security guard, was glued to the man in the faded blue shirt. Daniel wasn't a secret billionaire hiding in plain sight for a reality show. He wasn't a disguised prince playing a prank on the banking system. He was exactly what he looked like, a devastatingly hard worker. He was a man who possessed a once-in-a-generation intellect for computer architecture, a man who vastly preferred writing complex, beautiful code in the quiet of his kitchen over wearing a suffocating tailored suit in a corporate boardroom. He had completed the contract of a lifetime. The money was his, every single hard-earned cent of it. Linda stood up from her leather chair. Her legs were visibly shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. Her face, previously a flawless mask of arrogant superiority, was now pale, deeply flushed with profound, career-ending embarrassment. She realized with crushing, horrifying clarity that she had just publicly humiliated one of the most important, highly valued financial partners her parent company had ever hired. She picked up the check. She didn't hold it like a dirty napkin anymore. She held it with both hands, treating it with the reverence of a fragile, priceless pane of historical glass. She walked slowly back to the glass window, looking like a prisoner walking to the gallows. "Mr. Harper," Linda said. Her voice was small, fractured, and trembling uncontrollably. She couldn't even maintain eye contact. She looked down at the cold marble counter, her pride completely annihilated. I am so profoundly sorry. My behavior was entirely unacceptable. I made a terrible, inexcusable assumption based on appearance. Please accept my deepest, most sincere apologies." Daniel looked at her. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk back. He didn't raise his voice to humiliate her further. He didn't demand she be fired on the spot, even though he knew he could make exactly one phone call to Richard and end her entire career in banking forever. He knew what it was like to make massive mistakes under extreme pressure. He didn't need revenge. He just wanted to take his daughter to get some ice cream. "I don't need a VIP room, Linda," Daniel said quietly, his voice perfectly calm and steady, devoid of any malice. "I don't need a free cup of espresso, and I don't need a red carpet. I don't need anything special at all. I just need you to do your job, follow the rules, and process the deposit." Linda nodded frantically, tears of humiliation prickling the corners of her eyes. Yes, right away, sir." She turned to her keyboard. Her fingers flew frantically across the keys, bypassing every standard 3-day holding period, quickly inputting her manager-level override codes to force the massive sum directly into Daniel's standard everyday checking account, making it instantly fully available. The heavy industrial printer on her desk whirred loudly to life. The sound was deafening in the quiet bank. It spat out a thick, white deposit receipt. The atmosphere behind the teller counter had completely, radically transformed. The tellers who had been whispering and laughing 5 minutes ago were now standing perfectly straight, looking at Daniel with a mixture of profound awe, fear, and deep respect. Mia looked up at her dad, a small, incredibly proud smile forming on her face. She didn't understand the complex finance terms. She didn't know what ransomware was, but she understood exactly what had just happened. Her dad had stood his ground. Her dad had won. Linda carefully, reverently slid the deposit receipt under the small gap in the glass partition. Daniel picked it up, folded it neatly along the crease, and placed it into his old, worn-out leather wallet. He looked at Linda one last time, his expression unreadable. "Thank you. Have a good day." There was no extra drama. There was no screaming match. There was no theatrical mic drop. There was only the quiet, devastating, absolute power of ultimate professionalism. Daniel turned away from the counter, his large, calloused hand firmly holding Mia's small one. They began the long walk across the expansive marble floor toward the heavy glass exit doors. The crowd of people in the bank literally parted for him. There were no security guards rushing to escort him out anymore. There was no crowd of people trying to awkwardly shake his hand to apologize. There was no flashy, cinematic slow-motion sequence. It was just a father and a daughter walking quietly and confidently away from a situation that could have easily broken a lesser, more fragile man. Linda Grant stepped out from behind the safety of her bulletproof glass enclosure. She walked out into the main lobby, standing near the velvet ropes, watching them leave. Her pride was utterly shattered, her massive ego dismantled piece by piece, left in ruins on the bank floor. As Daniel reached the door, Linda spoke up one final time, her voice echoing faintly and desperately across the polished floors. "Mr. Harper," she called out. Daniel stopped and turned his head slightly, looking back over his shoulder. "I really was wrong," Linda said, her voice raw with genuine regret and the realization of her own prejudice. "I was rushing. I judged you unfairly. I promise you, I will never make that mistake in this branch again." Daniel looked at her. He didn't smile, but the hard lines around his tired eyes softened just a fraction. "Security checks are a necessary part of banking," Daniel replied, his voice calm, carrying clearly through the perfectly quiet lobby. "But basic human respect should never require verification." He pushed open the heavy glass doors. The bright, warm afternoon sunlight immediately spilled into the cold, sterile, artificial light of the bank lobby, washing over them in a golden glow. As they walked down the bustling city sidewalk, the chaotic, wonderful noise of traffic and life replacing the tense, suffocating silence of the bank, Mia tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy?" she asked, looking up at him with big, curious eyes, shielding her face from the sun. "Were you mad at that lady for being mean?" Daniel looked down at his daughter. He let out a long, tired sigh, the immense tension of the morning finally leaving his broad shoulders. He shook his head gently. "No, sweetie, I wasn't mad," he said softly, squeezing her hand tightly. "Getting mad doesn't solve anything. The only thing that matters is keeping your head, knowing your worth, and making sure people do things the right way." "Are we rich now?" she asked innocently, skipping over a crack in the pavement. Daniel chuckled, a deep, genuine, booming sound that made a passing pedestrian smile. "We've always been rich, Mia. We have each other. But now we can definitely afford extra, double sprinkles on our ice cream today." The heavy tinted glass doors of First Sterling Bank slowly swung shut behind them, sealing away the cold air and the embarrassed faces inside. The bank remained exactly the same physically. The marble was still shiny. The chandeliers were still bright. The money was still locked in the vault. But inside that building, the way every single employee looked at the quiet, tired strangers walking through the door had completely, irreversibly changed forever. If you firmly believe that profound respect should always be freely given before judgment is ever passed, hit that subscribe button to follow more powerful stories of the quiet truth winning in the end. Tell us in the comments down below. Have you ever been unfairly judged or falsely accused just because of how you looked? How did you stay calm and prove them wrong?